Okay, there's a lot of big stories. I'm talking really big stories that we must address. To go through all of this, I have former CIA Larry Johnson with me. Larry, thank you for joining me again.
Always a pleasure, my friend.
Okay, so since you and I last talked, there's been a lot going on with the different wars, but there's been a lot going on here in the United States of America. We had a presidential debate where the sitting president of the United States froze up multiple times. He was distracted. Many doctors are now coming forward saying, yes, he's showing signs of dementia. It's somebody took video camera of Dana Bash of CNN trying to point back to Jake Tapper to get the president's focus. I mean, it was really, really bad. I know that you're
Uh,
still well connected with the intelligence agencies and also people around the world. What was your reaction to the presidential debate, and what feedback are you hearing from people around the world?
well, I was not surprised. What surprises me is that people were surprised. You know, going, "Oh my God! It appears that Joe Biden may have dementia." And my son came out during the debate, and I said, "Son, Helen Keller could have seen this, okay? And just remember, Helen Keller was deaf, dumb, and blind." So this has been readily apparent for more than the entire time he's been in the presidency. In any of you or any of the viewers and listeners that have had a family member that's gone through either dementia or Alzheimer's, you've seen this. You've been there. This what's happening to Joe Biden is not it's not like a skin rash that can be cleared up with putting some Ovaltine on it or some ointment. Uh, this is a degenerative disease, and as bad as he was last Thursday, he's going to be worse a Thursday from now. And if they're hoping to trot him back out on the debate stage in September, he's going to be even worse then. So this isn't going in the right direction. And what's so alarming is that you've got so many people that have been enabling this dysfunction. It just goes to show that when Hans Christian Andersen wrote the Emperor's New Clothes, but that was what 300 years ago. He was tapped into human nature. What we're witnessing today is the same kind of human nature that existed back when there wasn't Instagram and Facebook, when there wasn't television or radio. But the story of how people can become so enamored of power that they will lie. And it took only the small child to finally say, "Hey, that he's naked. You don't have any clothes on." And everybody went, "Oh, the kid's right." Well, remember, it was a week before that debate on Morning Joe with Joe Scarborough and Mika Brzezinski. They were bringing on all these hacks to say that the Republicans, and I'm not here to defend the Republican Party, but I'm just, they were blasting all the MAGA Trump supporters for lying and taking these clips out of context of Joe Biden that actually Joe Biden, they won't let him on Jeopardy because he's so sharp and he's so able. He would win all the money. So my God, keep Joe Biden off Jeopardy. And so, I mean, they were pushing this nonsense. Meanwhile, if he doesn't have a teleprompter and it's after like 6 p.m. in the day, the man's not coherent anymore. Some would argue whether he was coherent before, but let's set that aside. Here is a man that is supposed to be in charge of U.S. foreign policy, has his finger, as they say, on the button that can launch and initiate a nuclear war, and he literally does not know where he is. That facial expression that you get with your slack jawed, the slack jaw is where your mouth's hanging open, going, and then you got that vacant look in your eyes. Like, where am I? What am I doing here? What is this? That, everybody could see that. It wasn't a matter of interpretation. You see that, and it's somebody who's he's not self-aware. You've seen, it's one thing to see that phenomena, in children who have suffered a severe physical, mental handicap, where they have no longer control over their face or their features. It's a medical condition, and you minister to the children, and you try to help them. But in this case, you've had an entire press enabling Joe Biden, and now they discover, hey, he's a mess. We got to get rid of him.
Yeah. I think where you and I cover the news every single day, we watch him. I told my wife, I have this documented. I've told my community many times. In the summer of 2020, he started to behave weird. He wasn't actually coming out and holding rallies. They were blaming it on COVID. But I told my wife, this guy has mild dementia. This was in 2020. Yeah. Now you can go back and watch videos from 2019 and 2020. He's not the same human being. And my point with saying this is 50 million people tuned in between all of the different news agencies and around the world. And they saw him maybe for the first time since the State of the Union or maybe the presidential debate in 2020. And they went, oh my gosh, like he looked like a deer in headlights for most of the 90 minutes. And I think it was pretty telling for them. Is this why Russia, who pays very close attention to American media and American politics, they're saying, oh, we would love another Joe Biden for 4 years? Because wouldn't they love to have a weak American leader in the White House?
No, actually, I think they're frankly frightened by this.
Okay.
Because what's he going to do? With Trump, you can make some predictions that he's going to be, he's not irrational. Biden's irrational. I mean, he's mentally incapable of logical thought. And this is self-evident now to people around the world. I did an interview with a journalist out of Lebanon, a woman who's been, she's been in the forefront of a lot of the analysis of what's going on with respect to Palestine. And her remark was, it was like, oh my God, what did we just see? And, some of the leaders like Macron and Rishi Sunak, Olaf Scholz, Giorgia Meloni out of Italy, they saw this Biden behind the scenes, but everybody said, okay, we're all going to pretend this is like a new movie, Weekend at Bernie's. In the Weekend at Bernie's movie, they hauled a corpse around for the weekend and pretended he was alive. That's what now it's actually that farcical movie has become real life, except Joe Biden is still breathing, and he's, has a few moments of lucidity during the day. But honest to God, the man is not in touch. And so you got to say, the question everybody keeps asking, who's making the decisions? Who's driving the truck? This is, you're sitting in the back of the plane, and, the plane's dipping and moving up and down. You got, man, what's wrong with this pilot? And like we're all looking up to the front, realizing, oh my God, there's no pilot there. Nobody's flying the plane. Because you're left with, was it Jake Sullivan, Anthony Blinken, then a bunch of unnamed people, or they're people you can name them, but most Americans don't recognize their names or know them. People like Ron Klain, who was his chief of staff. So what you have are people who've not been elected and who are not actually subject to any kind of scrutiny that are making very consequential decisions that could lead us into a nuclear war. And an example of one of those decisions, not to take us off track, but the United States has now announced that it's going to deploy mid-range medium range nuclear weapons into Europe. Well, in 2019, Donald Trump walked away, abrogated the International Nuclear Forces Treaty, the INF, which was the Intermediate Nuclear Forces Treaty, which was to prevent both Russia and the United States from developing missiles that could go from 500 to 5,000 kilometers, which, that's, roughly 300 to 4,000 miles, roughly. Well, we walked away from that, and Russia didn't start doing anything. But when the United States announced it was going to start deploying those kinds of missiles into Poland, Romania, Germany, Finland, the Russians said, "Okay, game on. We're gonna ramp up our production and put those out." And the difference there is now Russia can outpace us, by light years in terms of producing this stuff. Well, who's making that decision? I mean, it's not a rational decision to challenge Russia on this point at the very time we're incapable of manufacturing the very weapon systems we're claiming we want to deploy. And so that's where the danger of this mentally incapacitated president comes. And now we've got this, we always hear from the Democrats how important democracy is. The people must speak. Democracy. Now, again, the ignorance on both Republican and Democrat side, because we're a federal republic. We're not a democracy. We shouldn't be a democracy. We're a federal republic. Big difference. And yet, the Democrats now are trying to figure out a way to dump Joe Biden and put somebody else in there other than, the fake black lady that's vice president. I call her the fake black lady because she's actually a Caucasian of Indian descent, Indian, of the continent of India, not an American Aborigine tribe. And, so they've got the country, the party that insists that all Republicans are racist are themselves looking for a white candidate. They're talking about Gavin Newsom, Gretchen Whitmer, bring on the white people. Like I said, this would be high comedy if the very security of our nation was not at risk. So, I mean, it's
I've seen Italy. I've seen Italy and Iran. Essentially their SNL mocking, Biden, like fainting at the pulpit and or the podium, and so they are mocking. And going back to what you said, the news was trying to say, oh, Republicans are taking things out of context and making these cheap fakes or deep fakes. But then now you have the aides of like Italy and England and Germany. They're coming forward after the debate saying Joe Biden's attention span couldn't even last 1 hour. He missed the big G7 dinner. He was late. He wandered off. He couldn't hold his attention span. Like, it's really bad. It's so interesting to me to watch how each party portrays something, right? So the day after the debate, Biden stayed in Atlanta and did a rally, and he says, my grandpa said it doesn't matter how many times you get knocked down, but that you get back up, and everybody's like, oh my gosh, he's brilliant. He had a cold. He's still the great leader of the world. Then at that same event, an hour later, you have Republicans showing media clips where literally his wife, Dr. Jill Biden, is like, you did good, Joe. You knew all the answers. You're such a good boy, like treating him like a baby because she realized he's got an infantile mind at this point. It's just, it's interesting for me to watch the two sides. And speaking of that, you have the Obamas that are now saying, holy crap, we've got to be the adults in the room for the DNC. And publicly they're saying, we've got Joe's back. He's great. You can have an off night. He'll be better prepared in September. But my understanding is, and according to like the Daily Mail, behind the scenes, they are all panicked They are saying, who do we replace him with? Who's going to step in? How do we salvage this train wreck? What are your thoughts on the public signs that they're showing, and then what they're actually doing privately?
There's a part of me that wonders how much of this, let's call it scripted drama.
Okay.
So I know for a fact 7 months ago in January, I was hearing from friends who are connected to the Democrats. And they were telling me this in January, that there was a meeting in the summer, July, August of 2023 with Michelle Obama and top Democratic political operatives, where they persuaded Michelle Obama that, okay, we're going to, Joe Biden will resign. He'll announce that he's not going to run. And we want you to agree that you will be willing to serve as a candidate. Now, Michelle reportedly said yes. Now, I don't doubt my friends in terms, they weren't fabricating this. And again, this was last January. And I don't doubt that the people who were telling them this were telling them the truth. But I seriously doubt that Michelle Obama's got the stomach and the backbone, frankly, to do this. She's not, whatever her faults, she is not a narcissist like her husband, Barack. And candidly, to really anybody that's going to go and seek the presidency, they tend to be a narcissist. Trump's a narcissist. Obama was. Clinton, most certainly. George W. Bush, yes, in his own way. And it's unfortunate that we get these kinds of dysfunctional personalities out there in front. But, Michelle Obama, she couldn't even keep a Netflix show going. Couldn't attract an audience. So it's like if you put potato salad out in the hot sun in July and you don't attract flies, there's something pretty wrong with that potato salad, okay? And so she couldn't attract viewers. But there is this thing circulating that the Democrats have this elaborate plan in place to replace Biden, put a new candidate out there somehow, and that they'll beat the Republicans. Now, I don't doubt that there are some Democrats thinking that, and that maybe there are actually a plan to that effect. But they ignored the counsel of Mike Tyson. Remember, Tyson says you have a plan in place when you get in the ring until you get punched in the face, and then the plan changes. So what they didn't count on is how bad that Jill Biden and Hunter Biden want to hang on. Hey, Dad, hang in there. They will literally do a weekend with Bernie's with him. They will drag his corpse around and prop him up and make him look like he's, the Jeopardy king of the world, just in order they will avoid legal jeopardy. Now, so this leads to all sorts of possible speculation about the behind-the-scenes negotiation. I think the Bidens might agree finally that Joe will announce, okay, I've got some health issues and I'm just going to I can't do it. But that quid pro quo will be, he's got to guarantee that none of the families go into jail, that they all get a pardon, that, get to keep all of their ill-gotten gain, and the government will leave them alone. Well, that promise doesn't hold water if Donald Trump comes into office. Or maybe the negotiations go to the point they seek assurances from Trump. But they've got a real problem with time now because, nobody likes Kamala Harris. Well, I won't say nobody. The black women like her. Some of the liberal white women like her. And by God, it's her turn. She's put up with this nonsense for 3.5 years. It's her turn in the batter's box. Oh, that terrifies the Democrats because they realize she is, she's not the brightest light bulb to ever be installed in a tanning bed. Okay. She's got some limitations. And so they're terrified if they put her out on the campaign trail. So what we're going to witness between, we basically got a month and a half, about 7-8 weeks before the Democrat National Convention in August. Okay, we got 3 weeks left in July. We got 4 weeks. Got 4. So it's about 7 to 8 weeks that they got to figure out, can they get Joe Biden out? And then who do they put in? So, and this is what's funny. They're floating the names. Hey, Gavin Newsom. And I'm going immediately, hey, you don't need comedy writers for this. Newsom's campaign slogan, let me do to America what I've done to California. And all Americans would go, oh my God, not that. Please, please. What do we have to pay you to not hurt us? Because this is at a time, if you, I call it the U-Haul indicator. If you, and we had neighbors actually across the street that had to move from Florida to California. Basically, U-Haul paid them money. Oh, you want a U-Haul to go to California? Great, man. Here, let's give you some money to do it. Help your trip. Whereas if you want to take a U-Haul from California, like from Los Angeles or San Francisco, and come to Florida, they're going to charge you like $5,000 a mile. You're going to have a home equity loan to afford it as you come east, just because the exodus of people from California. Yeah, so they want to run that Gavin Newsom? I don't think so. Or there's Gretchen Whitmer. She would be ideal. Go out and do a survey of 100,000 Americans, and they go Gretchen Whitmer. They go, who?
Yeah, who?
Or wasn't she that witch in the story and that fairy tale?
Yeah.
They don't know. So it's this magical thinking which is taken home of the Democrat. But again, I say I'm not surprised by Democrat magical thinking. These are the same people that insist that men can have babies and breastfeed, okay? And that there's no such thing as biological sex. So when you're dealing with that level of delusion, don't be surprised when it spills over into the political arena too. And they start telling themselves lie after lie after lie. And then they're suddenly surprised where, oh my God, you mean there is no Santa Claus? Yeah, hey, welcome to adulthood.
Yeah. Let me switch gears and go international with you for a minute. You and I were both a little taken back. I probably more than you, but the United States supplied Ukraine with illegal cluster munition bombs. Ukraine has now used those on civilians on a beach where people were vacationing in Crimea on the Black Sea. 5 people are dead, over 100 injured. It looks as if, I don't know if the United States gave them coordinates or permission, but they certainly gave them the bombs. What do you know about this story? I saw the video. It looked like a horrifying scene out of a Hollywood movie. I know at least 5 are dead, over 100 injured. It was a difficult video to watch. What can you tell my viewers about that attack?
It could have been worse. So let's start with the ATACMS missiles. The United States is supplying ATACMS that carry cluster munitions. The cluster munitions are banned under some international conventions, but the United States didn't sign on to them. Russia's not signed on to them. A couple of other countries. So the United States and Russia could argue, okay, we're going to use them because we have not accepted the international ban. But they are banned because, these cluster munitions, if people aren't familiar with them, they got all these little balls about the size of a softball. They're a little smaller, and they'll spin out, and then they can explode and detonate. The problem is sometimes they don't explode. They wind up on the ground, and man, kids come along and go, cool, look at the new ball. When they pick it up and it blows up in their hand, it'll either blind them, decapitate them, blow off an arm or leg, or kill them. So it was seen as such a, really a dehumanizing weapon. That was the impetus that led to ban it. So this from the direction the ATACMS was launched, it requires one that there is intelligence data that's gathered only by the United States and its NATO allies. So the United States, apart from giving that weapon system to the Ukrainians, then the United States and its NATO allies produce the intelligence information, geocoordinate information, other data that's inputted to fire and launch that guided. It's because it's basically a guided missile. I've used the analogy. If you recall that last year there was a 6-year-old kid in Virginia, maybe it's 2 years ago now, who somehow got his hands on a gun from home, took it to school, and shot a teacher. And now,
I remember that.
Number one, there's no way a 6-year-old kid should have that gun, and a loaded gun at that. Yet he did. That means the parents are responsible, ultimately responsible. Why? They owned the gun. They didn't secure the gun. They loaded the gun, and the kid got a hold of it, and they had no control over it. Well, this is sort of like that, only worse. Because in this case, this is like the mother giving the kid the gun. When the United States gives the Ukrainians the ATACMS missiles, we're giving them the equivalent of a gun. And we're giving them a loaded gun. And we're giving them the ability to fire it. And then we've given all that ability, but because we didn't say, hey, go launch that missile on the beach, we get to say, well, that's not our fault. We didn't do that. You go, okay, time out. If I give the kid the gun, if I load the gun, and if I get it cocked and all ready to fire, I'm responsible as much as the kid is. So we're responsible for that. And this, it does appear what happened is the missile was hit, I don't know, through a combination of electronic warfare or maybe a near blast from a Russian air defense system. But the missile prematurely opened, and the dispersal, as you can see on that video, I mean, it was coming down, but it was pretty widely dispersed.
Yeah.
So it was actually not operating as it would in true combat mode. It had been disrupted, but nevertheless, the fallout from, there were some explosions and people were killed and a lot were wounded. So, that set in motion then a chain reaction. The Russians have been putting up, frankly, U.S. has been using HIMARS and supplying HIMARS, and the Brits Storm Shadows and other missiles to the Ukrainians over the last 2.5 years. But especially for more than a year and a half, Ukraine has been shelling and killing Russian civilians, principally in Belgorod, which is just across the border. But this event took place on Pentecost Sunday. And let's recall that the Russian people predominantly are Christian, Eastern Orthodox Christian, but they are devout. And celebrating Pentecost Sunday is actually a much more important holiday there in celebration than it is in your typical Christian church in the United States. So out of that, turns out, that attack took place on a Sunday. On Tuesday, Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin calls up the Defense Minister of Russia, Belousov. They have a conversation, not reported. But what we then subsequently learn is it looks like there was a U.S. Predator drone either shot down or disrupted in some way or it wasn't a Predator drone, it was a surveillance drone that was operating out in the Black Sea. And I guess it is reported that Belousov told the Americans, in no uncertain terms, any more of your drones in the Black Sea will be shot down. We'll take them out. Now, I've since, I was reporting on that in my blog at sonar21.com. And one of my friends who's served, in the U.S. military and was involved with air operations in Syria, was telling me that in 2017, the Russians shot down several of our MQ-1 drones. Not one or two, but several. Did you ever see that reported in the press? No. And what happened was our drones flew into into Russian-controlled airspace, and they had warned us in Syria, you fly into our space, we're taking you out. We did, and they did. So it's, some of this goes on behind the scenes. So it should be no surprise that there hasn't been any reporting on this, or that the Pentagon hasn't come out and denounced it. But that shows you the level that this is now escalated to. That I think Russians are going to be far more aggressive, not only in taking out unmanned aircraft, such as the Global Hawk, I think it's the G4, but they'll also probably physically challenge any manned aircraft. We got a KC-135. It's called the Rivet Joint. That's used for intelligence collection. That if that shows up in that area manned, the Russians will certainly force it to turn back without shooting it down, at least at this point. But it's now gotten a lot spicier.
Yeah. You had mentioned to me off camera that Zelensky has finally admitted that there are far more Ukrainian deaths than what he had been telling us. Tell us that, because that is such a big deal. We've been getting gaslit. Even members of the Senate are like, well, more Russians have died than Ukrainians. I'm like, really? More Russians have died in a war that's happening in a different country? Give me a break. So give us an update on that.
Yeah, so this was right after the debate. And Zelensky was at this meeting. It was a European meeting on security. And he's been interviewed. It's worth seeing the video. I posted it at Sonar 21.
Okay.
He's frightened. And he says, quote, "We don't have much time. And we've suffered a lot of killed, dead, and wounded on the battlefield." So he was making a plea for negotiations. He hadn't backed away from his crazy, plan proposed in Switzerland. But all of a sudden now he was singing it. This is the first time, really, since he took office and since this war started, that he actually admitted that they've suffered a lot of dead and wounded. Before they were pushing this nonsense of, the Russians only killed 30,000 of our guys. No. It's much, much worse than that. Right now, Russia, primarily because it's using this FAB bomb, the 3,000 pounder or 3,000 kilogram bomb, which is 6,000 plus pounds. That's a big boy. And when it goes off, apart from the blast radius, the blast wave that goes out and the concussive force of it can actually kill people without incinerating them or turning their body into dust. So right now the Ukrainians are suffering on average in excess of 2,000 killed and wounded a day. Well, just do the math on that. 30 days, you're over 60,000. And you do 2 months of that, which is they're coming on doing 2 months with those kinds of losses, you're 120,000. And that ignores everything that's gone on prior to this. And that's why they have a manpower shortage. And the Russian offensive that is underway all along that, 1,000+ kilometer line of contact, it's picking up steam. It's not slowing down. They are accelerating. And Ukraine doesn't have an answer for it. And so I think that's one of the reasons you saw this Zelensky, they call it the volte-face, the about face. He watched, he realizes Joe Biden's not going to be there to shovel money at him, the odds are that Donald Trump's coming in and the clock's ticking down. They don't have much time left. And really, even if the United States gave them all the money in the world, all the equipment in the world possibly could, it's not going to change the outcome on the battlefield. So,
yeah. Well, and they're running out of bodies. Like, what is George Washington going to start fighting out of a $1 bill? Like, they're running out of. I've been seeing the videos of them grabbing teen boys from birthday parties and restaurants and forcing them into vans and getting them ready to head to the front lines. I was just going to say, you kind of mentioned this, but I have to imagine. I've been trying to imagine how the world leaders reacted to the debate, but Zelensky in particular, I'm sure he was going, "Oh crap! I think it's over." And the odds. Speaking of odds, the gambling odds of Vegas are that Trump is going to win big time.
Yeah, and that becomes even more apparent with today's Supreme Court decision. That about that he does have presidential immunity, enforcing that that whole contrived case by Jack Smith. Ultimately, all these different lawsuits that the Democrats have ginned up to try to destroy Trump. They're making him more popular. They made him a more sympathetic figure than he might be naturally, and they're not going to get resolved anytime before the November election. So I think, barring unless there's an assassination of Donald Trump, which I don't rule out. I mean, the Democrats are that crazy. We'll try to get to him, or some act of God. We get blown, or some act of crazed man where we, find ourselves getting hit with nuclear weapons because one of the wars has spun out of control.
Yeah,
and so that's why what's important about what you're doing with your show and you're interviewing your variety of guests is, while you try to entertain by, asking good questions, the state of the world today is more dangerous, more perilous than at any time, really, I think, in the last 1,000 years, because we're saddled with some of the weakest political leadership that you could ever round up. If you had like an incompetency competition, hey, who's the most incompetent? It looks like we got the winners from that competition that are in charge in the United States, in England with Rishi Sunak, Francis Macron. He just got clobbered on Sunday in the election. And then you got Olaf Scholz. You got Donald Tusk, the clown in Poland. You get Zelensky. I mean, it's just the only one out there that's really, or the two that seem to have some stature and maturity, at least in the main role, is Putin and Xi Jinping. And yet the West is continuing to take provocative actions that literally run the risk of escalating into a nuclear war. Like we talked about earlier with the United States saying, oh, yeah, we're going to start deploying those intermediate nuclear weapons into Europe on the frontiers of Russia. And I go, look, I was only 7 years old when the Cuban Missile Crisis took place, but I do remember we were pretty concerned with the idea of Soviet nuclear weapons being 90 miles off our shore. And then we later discovered, well, the reason the Soviets were doing that is because we had already put those kinds of missile systems in place in Turkey on Russia's border. So the Soviets were doing turnabout's fair play. Well, now we're back to turnabout's fair play, except the United States is not in a position to play. We can't produce these munitions. I mean, just as a side note, we got 2 astronauts stranded up at the space station because we ourselves do not have the rockets and the equipment to bring them back. So we're having to farm it out to Elon Musk. Hey, Elon, can you help us out here? Or go back to the Russians who have been hauling our sorry behinds to the space station for almost the last 20 years. I mean, at some point, America's just got to wake up and realize that we can't continue to behave this stupidly and arrogantly at the same time. And yet we are.
Yeah. Well, I'm gonna put a link down below to sonar21.com so that people can go on there and follow you. Another thing that I'm seeing, Larry, is trending on Twitter right now. Democrats are demanding President Biden use executive authority to ban Donald Trump from running for president in order to save democracy. It's literally trending on Twitter right now.
Yeah.
How is banning your political rival saving democracy? And do you think Joe Biden and the crazies that back him in the White House will actually do this? Because it's not Twitter calling for this. It's top Democrat leaders.
I think, I got an armband on here, but I think they're starting to wear this armband that says, what would President Zelensky do? So that's what That's what President Zelensky did. He banned his political opponents. He banned the opposition party. He shut down the opposition press. He jailed priests. And you see these Democrats going, Zelensky may be onto something. Maybe that's our solution. Yeah, they all their frantic efforts, they are so completely lacking in irony. It's shocking because they want to use anti-democratic, fascist, totalitarian methods to prevent Donald Trump from running, all in the name of saving democracy. Yeah, that's the same stupid stuff we did in Vietnam. We got to destroy the village to save it. Well, if you're destroying all the houses and you're killing all the people, I don't think they're going to be too keen on being saved after that point.
Yeah.
But
when I saw that trending, I was like, are they kidding? Like this is absolute insanity. Use an executive order to ban your political rival.
Yeah. That would be grounds for impeachment. And yet the Democrats are enablers of law breaking. They're enablers of criminal activity is what they are.
Yeah, well, maybe they're like, okay, well, we'll go through the impeachment process, but in the meantime, that executive order will knock Trump out. Do you think? I want to go over something else that is trending on Twitter in 1 second, but we've got the upcoming sentencing of Donald Trump. He's now just dominating in his rallies. He's dominating in his fundraising. He did very well. He was very composed, very presidential during the debate. And now they are freaking out. Do you think that they're one of their last moves is we've got to jail him, whether it's home jail or Riker Island? Do you think that they're going to push for jail?
I think Donald Trump's praying that they jail him. This is the Brer Rabbit strategy. Don't throw me in that briar patch. Because they throw him in the briar patch, his popularity is going to go up. His support among Black Americans in particular is going to go up because they're going to go, see, these people have been doing that to our people for years, and now they're doing it to him too. He's one of us. So yeah, this is like I said, people make this assumption that the Democrats calling these shots and all the anti-Trumpers, because it's not just Democrats. You've got the Liz Cheneys and that Kinzinger out of Illinois, that moron, where they're out advocating to attack Trump. And Trump's got his faults, by heavens, yes. And he is good at saying on some issues he says one thing, does another. But what does resonate with Americans is, one, he's a pretty true populist, and he does genuinely care about what's happening to the average American. I know I've got 2 or 3 friends who they've dealt with. One guy, for example, pilot with FedEx. He was the number 1 pilot with FedEx, and one of his co-pilots had actually been the pilot for Donald Trump. And so, when they're flying a 14-hour flight from Memphis, Tennessee to Beijing, they'd have a chance to talk. And this guy always told him the stories. He said, the thing about Donald Trump, he said, was he always treated people the same. And I'm sure you've known in your life those people who they look and see if you're somebody important or wealthy or influential, you get treated one way. And if you're like the staff serving coffee, you get treated another. And that was one of the distinguishing characteristics about Trump, that he would treat people the same. And there would be that evidence of respect. And then not just, he wasn't patronizing about it. And so that's been one of his powerful appeals. And one of the reasons I think you see this, he resonates so well with the working class in America. Donald Trump is actually sort of in the same position as Democrats were 60 years ago, that were appealing to the working class, because the Republicans were seen as this political species that carried to the wealthy, to the country club set, and didn't really have the average person's interests at heart. So with the Supreme Court making the decision that it did, this whole effort to bastardize the use of law and to corrupt the judicial process seems to be coming to an end. And that I think would be one of the potential good things that could grow out of this, that Trump recognizing how bad the judicial system is, how it can be used to mercilessly punish people for their political views, not for what they did, not for any criminal conduct, but for just having the wrong ideas that the majority say are wrong. When you can find yourself getting prosecuted and because you don't allow your children to be mutilated, that some teachers convince them that they want to change their gender, change their sex, and you can be prosecuted and jailed in some states in the United States. That's where American people start pushing back and go, wait a second. It's one thing to be accommodating and, try to treat people the same, but don't come and take our rights away as parents. And, that's just one of those other issues out there that resonates. So we're, the next 3 months, what's guaranteed? It's going to be one of the most chaotic times in American politics that you've ever seen.
Yeah, I believe that. Okay, here's the next thing that was trending on Twitter. Maybe this has to do with the immunity ruling from the Supreme Court 6-3. But on Twitter, trending right now is Democrats are also demanding that Donald J. Trump be labeled a terrorist, and the U.S. Army commanded by Biden to arrest him and do a military tribunal. Like, wow, the QAnon bullcrap has swung from one party to the other, right? Like, this is insanity to me.
This is, just a sign of desperation. They know what's coming. They know they're going to get their ass handed to them. They know the vast majority of American people said, we're sick and tired of this. And instead of these people being smart enough to say, hey, let's tone it down, let's keep our plans secret, we'll still figure out how we can sandbag and sabotage this guy. Oh, no. They're opening their mouths and making it quite apparent that they are these, neo-fascists, authoritarian dictators. I don't want to ever hear one of them lecture us about what Xi Jinping is doing or Vladimir Putin is doing. These guys are worse than any authoritarian dictator in world history. They're just as bad. And it's the only thing that is there is this thing called karma, and let's hope the karma plays out.
Yeah, at least like the Obamas and especially the Clintons, as evil as the Clintons are, they are like, whoa, you can't go too progressive. You've got to at least appear like a centrist.
Yeah.
And they're trying to tamp down the crazy of the left, the most left progressive side of the party, which is dominating the party, at least from media talking points. But they're saying we got to tone it down. But you've got all these wild Democrats. I mean, they're literally saying label him a terrorist, and have the military arrest him and a military tribunal against a former president.
Hey, look, that's how the Soviets used to roll. Once they could declare somebody an enemy of the state, man, they'd cart their ass up and haul them off to Siberia. And they'd be breaking rocks. They didn't necessarily do anything wrong. Well, that was the Soviet Union then. That doesn't exist now. What we're seeing is the United States, you've got a group of people that want to turn the United States into the old Soviet Union. And not surprisingly, a number of them are avowed communists in the old style sense, that they want to have the government with total control over an individual's life, that the government decides what the individual is going to do, as opposed to saying, hey, you have the right to make choices. But if you're going to make those choices, you also have to be responsible for those choices.
Yeah. Our mutual friend, Colonel Douglas McGregor, said after the presidential debate that America's enemies witnessed a diminished sitting president, and that this is incredibly risky for the world and for America. He recommended that Biden step down and call for an early election in order to get a new president in power. Can this even happen, or isn't the proper protocol for Biden to either step down or Kamala Harris to invoke the 25th Amendment and have him removed, and then she fills the seats? What are your thoughts on his comments?
Yeah, no, I think I have a lot of respect for Doug, but he's off base. Follow the Constitution. Constitution dictates the president's medically incapacitated, either mentally or physically, to serve. He's removed from office, which means then Kamala Harris steps in as vice president. The problem is people don't like her as vice president. They don't trust her as president. But hey, that's what you folks chose, so live with your choice. Okay. And then once she's in as president, she would have to nominate someone to serve as vice president, which then gets real interesting because anybody that's selected as vice president is going to have to be approved by the House of Representatives and by the Senate. And in fact, I think the vote in the House is not by, it's basically by state. So, Florida gets a vote, Texas gets a vote, and so the Republicans are actually in a position where they could literally dictate who's going to be the next vice president.
Yeah. So imagine them making Trump Kamala Harris as vice president. Oh my gosh, that would be great.
Yeah. So, I mean, look, we're facing about basically three scenarios. Scenario one is Biden's not going to resign. He's going to hang in there. He's going to run for president. He's going to lose, or he might win. But regardless of whether he wins or loses, whoever is his vice president will become president if he gets elected. He's not going to survive another 4 years in office. So, that's option one. Option two, he announces he's not running for re-election, creates an open convention, and then the Democrats show up in Chicago, and it's going to be like a sort of a deja vu all over again with respect to 1968, where they slug it out and figure out who's going to be the nominee. And, that will split the Democratic Party at that point. But it may mean that Kamala would be the candidate, or Kamala might not be the candidate. Or option three, the 25th Amendment and or Joe Biden just doesn't come down for breakfast some morning. He's, cold and dead in his bed upstairs. So, those are the three basic options going forward. The negotiated end for the 25th Amendment, a lot of that is in the hands right now of Jill Biden and Hunter Biden, who I don't know if it's an opening negotiating position or if it's sincere that they want him to hang in there so that the grift can continue, or they want to make sure they get a good deal cut that they're not going to wind up in handcuffs and wearing orange suits.
Yeah, my understanding is that Jill and Hunter are the two biggest voices telling him to push through. I guess I read on the Daily Mail that even Biden's sister has come forward and said, "Shame on you, Jill. This is elder abuse. Tell him to step down with dignity. Tell you guys he can walk away right now with dignity and say, I'm going to spend my remaining days with my family and grandchildren." But my guess is Hunter wants him to stay in because he doesn't want to go to jail. He needs that pardon, but they don't want to immediately pardon. So he has to go through the judicial process of appealing. And Jill Biden, I think she likes the attention. I think she likes being first lady. I think she likes the pretty dresses and the photo shoots, but that's endangering our country.
Right. Yeah. These people are putting themselves over country. That's for sure. They're not patriots.
Yeah. Okay. Another big thing that came out, and I appreciate you coming on. Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas has made a public statement about Special Prosecutor Jack Smith, who's going after Trump for J6 criminal charges, which just got weakened because of the Supreme Court, but also espionage charges in the classified documents case in Florida. Justice Thomas said, "How can a private citizen bring charges on behalf of the government, let alone against a former president? He was not appointed by Congress. Does he even have the authority?" So you now have a Supreme Court justice saying this person doesn't even have legal authority to go after Donald Trump. What are your thoughts on that story?
No, Thomas is exactly right. I mean, this is, Jack Smith was simply ginned up as a political hitman. And he comes with a very sordid past. My business partner, I don't want to call him former business partner because we still have a relationship. We're just not working at the same level we were years ago. He filed a complaint with the Inspector General of the Department of Justice. He's got very credible evidence that Jack Smith, when he was over in Europe with, with the International Criminal Court, that he was involved with extortion and corrupt activities, and using and extorting people out of Serbia in particular. So Smith's got a very, very questionable past, and he is actually under investigation right now by the Inspector General of the Department of Justice. So I think you're going to be seeing he'll probably be forced to drop out and end this charade by August, maybe sooner.
Okay. The New York Times has run two inflammatory article headlines within a day of each other. Let me read those to you, and then I want to get your reaction. The first one was from the New York Times again, that in service to his country, President Biden should drone strike Donald Trump. This is an actual article headline that came out today. And then just about 24 hours ago, to serve his country, President Biden should leave the race. So which is it? To serve his country, should he leave the race, or should he drone strike former President Donald Trump? I can't believe that these are even headlines at the New York Times.
Yeah, well, when they're advocating the death of a president, even a former president, it usually elicits a Secret Service intervention and a possible arrest. I mean, this is it's beyond disgusting, and that's the kind of that's the kind of just stupid action by political partisans who are so blinded with hate that they forget that there's some fundamental principles of law and order that ought to be upheld in the